What's going on, people, and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be covering something very simple but something very powerful at the same time, and that is Illustrator shortcuts. We're not going to be covering all of the shortcuts because there's a lot to learn, and I admittedly haven't learned all of them myself, but I'm going to teach you a few that I use on a regular basis. So logo designer, very basic stuff. But I think if you can get your head around how to use these, what these shortcuts are used for, and it kind of becomes second nature, then you can really improve the speed in which you produce your designs, and in turn improve your workflow as well, which is the whole point in actually, learning what these shortcuts do. So without further ado, we're going to jump into Illustrator. We're going to teach you a few basic shortcuts, what they do, and I'm going to give you some examples of how they work as well. So let's jump into Illustrator and see what these shortcuts are all about.
Right, so we're in Illustrator now. You'll notice that there's a lot going on, but what I've done for you guys to make it easy to follow along with the video, and even after you've watched the video and you want something as a future reference, is I've designed a mini workshop that you guys can use completely free. And if you want to access it after you've watched this video, drop a like, subscribe, and check out the description where there's a free link for you to download this workshop. Let's start with something really basic. Two basic tools that you're going to be using predominantly in Illustrator, the selection tool and the direct selection tool. So by default, I should have the selection tool enabled, which I do, and that's indicated through a black cursor. So if you notice outside of the canvas, I'm currently moving my mouse, and that is the black cursor to indicate that you're using the selection tool. If I change that to the direct selection tool, you'll notice it changes to white, and that's just so you can see which one you're actually using. So V for selection tool, A for direct selection tool, and both of these tools do completely different things, but you'll be using them a lot. So let me show you what the selection tool does first. So if I drag a rectangle out and then I go to the selection tool, you notice I can move the object around. I can also resize it. If I want to resize it in the corner, or I want to resize it in the middle, so it's just affecting the height of it, then I can do that. I can also do it so it just affects the width of the object. I can rotate the object if I want to, and it's just basically making it so that you can transform it, have a little bit of flexibility in terms of where you want the object to be, and that's how the selection tool generally is used. If I then want to use the direct selection tool, so if I switch that to A, then you'll see that I've got the direct selection tool enabled now, and instead of you having those transform options like you did before, instead you've only got access to the anchor points, which, if you don't know, is basically what everything is made up of in Illustrator. So every object that you're using is going to be made up of these little anchor points that you see in the corners of this rectangle. So if I'm selecting an anchor point, what I can do is I can basically manipulate it again, but you have a little bit, it's a bit more advanced compared to the transform tool. So as you can see, I can put this in the corner to make like a funky little arrow shape if I wanted to. I can also change it so it's a rounded corner, so one specific corner is rounded. Everything to do with your anchor points, use the direct selection tool. If you basically just want to move something around, or you want to rotate it, or you want to resize it a little bit, then what you'd use is the selection tool by pressing V on your keyboard. So let's move on to the next shortcut, and my phone is buzzing. I'm sorry if you could hear that. Really simple stuff. Your text tool, you're going to use this a lot. Again, press T on your keyboard, and if you basically click anywhere on the canvas, it should create a text box for you. For whatever reason, I've got black text, so I'll just change that to white so you can see what I'm doing. Same goes if you click and drag. If I wanted it to fit in this rectangle, I could click and drag to make sure that it does, and then if I let go, it should create text for me. Again, by default, it's just made it black, and my phone is buzzing again. Leave me alone, please. But yeah, that's basically how I use the text tool. T on the keyboard for text, P on the keyboard for pen. So if you want to use your pen tool, again, if you want to create these anchor points, this is very advanced. So if you are a beginner, you might not want to play with the pen tool just yet. It's a little bit daunting when you first jump into Illustrator or you first jump into Photoshop, but the sooner that you get over those initial nerves and you start playing around with the pen tool and you get more comfortable with it, you will learn that you can do some really great stuff with the pen tool. So I would highly recommend using the pen tool, even if you are a beginner. I know that you might not need to use it at first, but if you just force yourself to try and learn these different things, then you'll notice that the pen tool is a tool that you can really use to get super creative with stuff. We move on to the brush tool. Press B on your keyboard to access that, and you'll notice when I do these little squiggly lines, it's basically just following whatever pattern I'm basically moving my mouse in. This is a really cool thing to use, you know, if you wanted to do like a handwritten style maybe, or you just wanted to do like a little bit of an illustration, then you can use the brush tool to do that. I know that I've done that in the past when I'm creating like handwritten icons and things like that. The brush tool is a really cool tool to use, so that's how you access that. Just press B on your keyboard. Let's move on to the next lot of shortcuts. We're going to be playing around with some basic shapes now. So rectangle tool, to access that, you press M on your keyboard. And then if I click and drag, you'll notice it creates a rectangle for me. If I want to create an ellipse or a circle, I can use the L key on my keyboard. And if I click and drag, again, really simple stuff. It will then create that circle or ellipse for me in whatever format I need it in. Then if I create a line, so I always get this confused, but I'm pretty sure that this is the backslash. So if we press that on the keyboard, I've pressed Z by accident, which is zoom, just a bonus shortcut for you there, not intentional. But yeah, if you use the backslash key on your keyboard, and then you click and drag, you'll notice that it makes a line for me. I haven't got a stroke enabled at the moment, which is why it didn't show, but yeah, that's how you create a line. Really basic, like I say, but you'll probably be needing to use all of these different tools for different purposes. Let's say, for example, you wanted to make a table and you need different segments in there. Maybe you need a horizontal and a vertical line in there. Then you might use the line tool to be able to achieve that. So let's go over to the next lot of shortcuts. This is where it gets a little bit more advanced, but I'll just explain these in the most simple way possible. It does get a bit in depth, and you can use these keys for several different things that you're trying to achieve. So we'll use the Constrain Object key as an example of what I mean. So if I go to the rectangle tool again, and I drag this out, you'll notice if I'm not holding the shift key, I have freedom to basically move the rectangle wherever I please. But if I want it to make a perfect square and I want all sides of the rectangle to be exact, then I would hold the shift key to constrain the object essentially. You can use the shift key, for example, if you wanted it to follow, whether it be a horizontal or a vertical axis exact and you don't want any movement to be there. You can hold the shift key to constrain it that way, but it just basically means that it's restricting the movement of whatever you're using. So any object you're using, if you hold shift, it will restrict that movement to follow an exact path. So that's a general idea of what you would use the shift key for. The alt key, really simple stuff, but this is super cool. So if you hold alt and then, you know, drag your whatever object it is that you're working with, you'll notice that it's made a complete copy of that object. If I let go now, then it's, you know, made a duplicate of it. And if you use this and then use Control and D, this is really cool. Let's say, for example, you're making a pattern or something like that. So if I use Alt and Shift, again, Shift to constrain the object, Alt to duplicate it, you'll notice I've then made a duplicate of that rectangle, and it's following on that same axis. But then if I want to make another duplicate and I want it to be the exact same space in between those two objects, then all I would do is press Control and D, and you can do that as many times as you want, and it'll just keep on repeating whatever the original copy was. Let's scroll down to the next lot of shortcuts. These are really handy stuff as well. So if you're familiar with guides or you're not familiar with guides, this is going to be super helpful to learn how to access them. So first things first, showing or hiding your rulers. So at the moment mine are hidden. If I press Control and R, you'll notice that you have some figures displayed at the top of the screen and on the left hand side. This is where you're going to be able to access your rulers. So again, Control and R to hide them, Control and R to enable them. And then if I then wanted to create a ruler from this, I would click and drag anywhere on the canvas. If you need it to be anywhere specific, let's say the middle of a path, then you would obviously drag it to that section. It should automatically attach itself to whichever path you're trying to basically put it on. Then if I let go, it's created a ruler for me. So it's created a nice little guide that I can follow. You can do it on the left hand side as well. So if you need something to be horizontal, then you can make sure that it's on there as well. And then if I wanted to hide these, let's say for example, I've positioned an object within this guide that I've just created. So let's use a rectangle as an example, drag it into the center of these. And then let's say I don't want to see the guides, but I want to see the object. What you would do is you would press Control, semicolon, and it gets rid of it for you. So again, same way that you can hide and show the rulers, if you press it again, it'll appear again. So instead of just removing your guides completely, you can simply just hide them. which a lot of the times is what I do, which is really handy. Bit of an unusual one that I'm going to show you now. You might not use it that often, but it's really handy to kind of see an outline version of what you're working with sometimes, so you can spot any errors where you might not spot them initially. So if I press Control and Y, you can see an outline version of everything that I've created. It won't do it for the text, but it will do it for all the different objects. So as you can see, for this little these bits of elements that I've created at the side, you'll notice that these elements aren't joining, so they're not actually united with each other. So you can see where basically everything's hidden when it's not in the outline mode. When I go on the outline mode, you'll notice that these objects aren't actually merged, so they're individual shapes. So it's really handy to see. So it gives you a little bit of a behind the scenes or a blueprint of everything that you've created. So you can notice little errors behind the scenes that you might not notice if you didn't have it in the outline mode. And like I say, these are all shortcuts that you can use to enable and disable stuff. So if I press Control and Y, it enables the outline mode. If I press it again, it gets rid of it. Let's move on to the next lot of shortcuts. And this is a really handy one. When you're working with a load of different objects, a lot of the time you're going to need to group stuff together because you might need to move a lot of things at the same time. It becomes really tedious if you have to individually select stuff. So let's create a few rectangles and I'll show you exactly what I mean. So if I've got a load going on at the moment, and let's say, for example, I want to move stuff, but I don't want to move it individually because that's going to take a lot of time to select everything. And I really just want to move everything as a whole. What you would do is initially you'll have to select everything. So you can either do it by clicking and holding Shift to select all the different objects, or you can hold down, you click and just select everything that way. Make sure that you've got the selection tool enabled, otherwise you're not going to be able to do that. And if you let go, you'll notice it selects everything. Now if I want to group everything together, I will just press Control and G, and then you'll notice if I click outside the canvas and then I click on this object again, everything is within the same group. Now if you wanted to ungroup something, you know, let's say for example I've grouped all these different rectangles and I want to specifically edit this one that I'm hovering over now. Simple way to do that is Control Shift G. That ungroups all the selection. So if I now click outside of the canvas and then I select that rectangle that I mentioned a moment ago, you'll notice that I have control over that one specifically. And again, once I've moved it, if I want to group them again, I can just highlight everything, Control and G, and it'll group everything for me again. So let's move on to the next lot of stuff. So this is a cool one, gradient tool. So let's make a rectangle. So I'm just going to make a random one in the canvas. I'm going to move that off to the side so you can see what I'm doing. Now if I wanted to make a gradient within this rectangle, I can press G on the keyboard, then I'll have access to my gradient tool. I can then just click like a linear gradient, so I can change that to a linear gradient within that rectangle, and then I can basically choose how I want that gradient to be displayed now that I've got the gradient tool enabled. So I can click and drag, you know, if I want the colors to be closer, I can click and drag and let go to make sure that it's in, you know, in that sort of format. Or if I wanted it at a specific angle, you kind of got freedom to do that. And if we use the Shift key again, it snaps to specific angles. So if you want it to be precise, use the Shift key to constrain the object and just let go when you're ready, and boom, you're done. We're going to move on to switching your filler stroke. So let me just make some random colors here. So we've got a black as a stroke and a white as a fill. So if I create a rectangle again, I'm going to make it outside the canvas actually so you can see what's going on. I'm going to make the stroke a little bit bigger for you as well. So you'll notice I've got kind of a grey outline and a white fill. If I wanted to switch these basically between each other, so I want a white stroke and a grey fill, I would basically press Shift and X, and as you can see, it switches these colours for you on the fly. Really simple to do, but if you wanted to switch the colours and you don't want to manually go over to here and click this arrow, then you can simply just press Shift and X and it will do it for you. The eyedropper tool is another really cool one. So you can either use this with text, for example. So if I create a text box and I'll just put some random text in there, change it to white. I don't think I've got it enabled, but let's try that again. Let's say I wanted to, oops, didn't mean to do that. Let's say I wanted to basically copy the way that another text looks. So this text at the bottom, let's say I wanted to copy that. I could use the eyedropper tool to do that. So I can press I on the keyboard. I can then hover over this text and I think because it's locked, actually that's not going to work. Let's try something else. So if I wanted to, yeah, there you go. So you see the cursor changes. Instead of it just being an eyedropper, it has the T above it now. So if I then click onto that text, it will basically copy whatever format I've got that text in. So really simple way of using the eyedropper tool. If you've made a new text and it's changed it to something random like Century Gothic and you want it to be Montserrat in this purpose, then you would simply use the eyedropper tool to copy the way that it's formatted, and as you can see, it changes that on the fly. Another way that you can use the eyedropper tool is, let's say for example, I wanted to change this color to the green that I'm using up here. You can simply do that by hovering over something that's green in the canvas, preferably not a text object because it's going to change it to that specific format if it's different. But if you have something on the canvas which is green, you want to change it to that, simply click on it and it will change it to green. So really cool way of using the eyedropper tool and really easy to access as well. All you need to do is press I on your keyboard. So this is the last lot of stuff that I want to show you guys, and this is all to do with saving your projects. So let's start off with saving for web. Saving for web, you just simply save like an artboard for web, whether it be a JPEG or a PNG. Let's say for example it's got some transparency in here and I want to save it as a PNG. Really simple. You can go Control Alt Shift and S, then it'll open up this window. You have some different options that you can play around with, very similar to how it's presented on Photoshop. You can change it to a PNG, a GIF, whatever it may be, and then you can simply save things like that. Let's say for example I wanted to export things for screens. So as you noticed, I've got loads of different artboards going on at the moment, and let's say I wanted to export every single one of those artboards at the same time. You can do that by pressing Control Alt E. It will open your export for screens window, and as you can see, these different artboards are now visible on the screen, so I can enable specific ones, I can disable specific ones, and then I'll just make sure that whichever ones I've enabled, they'll save at the same time, which massively saves you time in the long run as well. I can also from here change the scale, I can change the format. That's how you save stuff for screens. Let's say I'm working on a project for a client, the document's already been made in the past and I've made some minor edits to it and I just want to save that and overwrite the previous save. I'll just press Control and S to make sure it does that and it saves it on the fly for you. Let's say for example I'm working on a new document, or I'm working on a document, let's say a revised version of a project, and I want to make sure that it's separate from the previous document that I've made and it doesn't overwrite any changes. I'll just press Control Shift S, open up this window, name it to whatever you want, press save, and that's your new document set up. And that's all the shortcuts today, guys. So 23 shortcuts in total. I hope that I've been able to explain what each of them do, what tool you're accessing, and give you a general idea of what each of the tools do. And yeah, if you want to access this workshop, all you need to do is go in the description of this video. If you check out the link that I've got in there, follow it, enter your email, enter your first name, and you'll be able to download this for free, and you'll be able to sign up to my newsletter at the same time, where I'll be able to keep you updated with any news, tips and tricks, and as soon as a new YouTube video goes out, I shoot an email across to you guys as well, so you know exactly when it's live. So thank you very much for you guys for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, stay safe, and I hope to see you in the next one. Take care.